Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Powell-Drescher Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation's presentation on research advocacy. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Sasha Powell. I am an ovarian cancer survivor and research advocate, and I'm one of the founders of the Powell-Drescher Foundation. My oncologist, Dr. Charles Drescher, and I started the foundation because we believe that scientists and survivors can really help each other, and we're actually more powerful together. Advocates, those of us who are survivors, patients, family members, caregivers, previvors, or other persons who are touched by ovarian cancer, really bring the experience of living with the disease to those who are working on its prevention, detection, treatment, and cure. However, the scientists may not naturally come into contact with the advocates or may not realize the critical value that the advocate perspective can bring to their work. Likewise, advocates may not fully appreciate how significant our contribution to science can be and may feel overwhelmed at the thought of having to speak science, a language that many of us do not understand completely. Yet each group can really learn from the other and also educate the other. So the mission of the Powell-Drescher Foundation is to power the future of ovarian cancer research by raising funds for research, but also by championing the importance of that collaboration between scientist and survivor. We're really excited to launch this program this morning as it will promote that important collaboration. In addition to the presentation on research advocacy, we're planning to send a research advocate to the annual conference of the American Association for Cancer Research, the AACR, in Orlando in April of 2023. And we want to provide the advocate with all the tools necessary to really excel while they're there. This presentation will hopefully be a first step toward providing those tools by giving an overview of the scientific conference and how an advocate can best navigate them. At the end of the program, I will share more experience about our specific program and how you could attend a conference next year. This morning, we will hear from ovarian cancer researcher, Dr. Kristin Anderson, who will provide information about how to navigate a scientific research conference, as well as the details about the AACR's Scientist Survivor Program. We'll also hear from ovarian cancer survivor and research advocate Annie Ellis, who will share her experience with the AACR's Scientist Survivor Program, as well as her insights as an experienced research advocate. Can we have the next slide, please? To provide some background, there are many ways in which we can advocate for improvement in a disease. As is depicted here on this slide, there are 5 ways I'm going to touch on. The first is policy advocacy or political lobbying. This advocacy really focuses on legislative changes that benefit patients. It often involves lobbying or creating overarching policies at all levels of government to get more funding allocated for biomedical research, or perhaps to allocate more of the funding to a particular disease or program. We also have patient support or peer support. This is something that many of us provide in varying degrees all the time. These advocates directly help patients with their decisions, their medical visits, providing support systems and other resources. It really could be as simple as reaching out to another survivor to check in on them. It could be accompanying someone to a medical appointment. It could be providing them with something that would be useful, such as a chemo care bag, or even just delivering a meal for them. Down in the right bottom corner, we have watchdog, or what I usually think of as awareness. These patient advocates bring system-wide issues to light and really raise awareness about a particular disease in general. It might involve sharing the symptoms so that we have better early detection, or it might help be sharing the statistics to highlight the gravity of the problem so that we can increase the research funding. Finally, in the bottom left corner is fundraising. This includes efforts to raise money for patient services and for medical research. Not all of the scientific research in the United States comes from government funding. In fact, much of it comes from organizations like the Powell-Drescher Foundation. And so many of us work to raise those research funds to supplement the federal funding. And in the center, you can see that research advocacy is yet another way that we can advocate. It's different from the ways I've mentioned, but is really central to all of them. It puts the advocate directly in support of the scientists who are conducting the research. The goal of research advocacy is to work with the researchers and the research system to make scientific efforts more relevant, timely, and barrier-free for the patients. We also get involved in research programs and policies to help move those discoveries toward clinical use. And even within the category of research advocacy, there are several ways that we can participate, and you'll hear about many of them in today's program. Our first presenter is Dr. Kristin Anderson. Dr. Anderson is a senior research associate at the University of Washington and the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. Her research interest is in the use of engineered adoptive T-cell therapy to treat solid tumors, and in particular ovarian cancer tumors, and to translate their use into treatment protocols for patients. Dr. Anderson obtained her PhD in immunology from the University of Minnesota. I always learn something every time I listen to Kristin talk. And in fact, the first time I ever attended a scientific conference, it was to sneak in the back just to hear her present. So Kristin, I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective on scientific conferences from a scientist's perspective.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you to the Powell-Drescher organization for the opportunity to be here and share some of my experiences as a researcher with all of you today. So I'm going to come at this conversation mostly from a very high overview about what scientific research conferences are even for, who attends them, why do we go, what happens there, because my guess is not many people in the room have been to one of these before. If you have the ability to use the buttons on your Zoom and can raise your hand virtually, or if you're on camera and want to raise your hand, can I see how many people have actually been to a scientific conference in their life? Okay, great. So we've got a lot of newbies here. Welcome, and I'm really excited to hear that you're interested in learning about what happens at these events. So, big picture, what is a scientific research conference? These are events that can be anything from a small number of people, something like 50 to 100 participants, all the way up to in the thousands. Some of the largest scientific research conferences that happen annually have something on the order of 30 to 50,000 people who come. And now that we've lived through a pandemic and gotten really comfortable with virtual meetings, many of these events are now also done in a hybrid format. So there might be 30,000 plus people on site, as well as several thousand more who are virtual streaming the event so they can participate as well. So here I'm simply showing a picture from one of the largest scientific meetings that we have currently. This is ASCO, the American Society for Clinical Oncology. So this is a conference in particular where lots of oncologists get together and they talk about cutting edge discoveries and findings in clinical oncology, taking care of cancer patients. But that's not the only kind of conference. We don't just talk about what's going on in the clinic. Scientists go to conferences to share lots of big ideas. And really the focus is most cutting edge science. What are the newest findings that we have? And one of the reasons that we do this in person rather than just through publishing articles is because the interface, the interaction really allows us to get feedback on our ideas. This is where we get challenged. People ask us about science from perspectives that we don't have because these are people who think differently than we do. And this is actually one of the ways that really great science gets accomplished, is when we challenge each other to think about things from different directions and to make our science better. So those are two of the biggest reasons that we get together every year at these conferences. But in addition to that, a huge component of scientific conferences is actually networking. And this is partially networking to build our professional networks, but it's also to network with people in and outside of our expertise, because scientific conferences are one of the places where we gain mentors, not just our direct scientific advisor who we see in the lab on a regular basis, who helps us think about our science better, but professional mentors who are going to help us in our lives and our careers. So together, all of these things really happen at these conferences. And it's critical that we go every year. So that's why you're going to see, when you attend a scientific conference, a huge array of people, varying stages in their career development. We're all getting together. So what happens when you go to these events? They can last anywhere from a day and a half, 2 days, to an entire week. And that time is filled with a lot of presentations, but those presentations can take many forms. So one of the most common kinds is an oral presentation. This is where the scientist will stand at the podium. They usually have a PowerPoint presentation, and they're sharing the data that they have with the audience. So many times scientists are sharing something that they have just published, a brand new piece of science that they put in the literature so that other people can see it, but they're explaining their findings in their own words that might be more accessible than simply reading the text of a paper. This is also an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of the authors who wrote that paper to get more insights into what they did and why. Now, another really great presentation type that happens at these conferences is something called poster presentations. This is where people will put together their presentation all on one document, hang it up on a poster board, and they will stand in front of their poster and talk to people about what they did and why. And this is actually a really great interactive opportunity where scientists get more one-on-one face time with other scientists, which can be really beneficial, especially for trainees, people who are learning to do science, who are in medical school or graduate school, or who maybe have their degree and are doing a second round of training, like a postdoc or a fellowship. So these opportunities to interact one-on-one and ask really targeted questions are also a really great opportunity to make science better. Now, another type of presentation that happens at these conferences, especially at the larger ones, are panel discussions. And these can also take many formats. Sometimes these are scientists who may disagree about the interpretation of their findings, who get up on stage and they discuss. These may be people who are discussing different ideas for where they think the direction of the field is going. So people talk about lots of different things in these panel discussions. But some of the most engaging panels I've actually seen are ones where survivors actually take the stage and talk about their patient experience, or when scientists engage with survivors on stage and they talk about what is happening to try to make patient care better. There are also networking events that happen at these conferences. So usually these happen over meals or in the evening. And these are, again, opportunities for trainees to really network with more established scientists and clinicians in the field so that they can build those relationships moving forward. And then finally, oftentimes there are technology displays. So companies that make new technologies that try to move science forward need to share with scientists that they exist. So scientific conference is often an opportunity for technology companies to get face time with scientists and show that their new technology they've built can make the scientist's job faster, easier, more accurate in the long run. So these are all things that you would see if you go to a scientific conference. And in all honesty, most of these things happen at overlapping times. So there are sessions at most conferences where there are oral presentations and posters and panel discussions and networking events and technology discussions all going on at the same time. So these events can get very big very fast. And it takes a lot of coordination to figure out which event should I go to specifically. So what kinds of things do we discuss at scientific conferences? You may have heard people talk about basic science or clinical science. You might have heard these overarching terms before. And there are many different ways that we do science, both in the laboratory and in the clinic. So just as an overview, basic research really touches on the fundamental mechanisms. How are things working? Why do they do this thing this way? And sometimes these use model systems like flies or worms or yeast cells or mice. These can be very, very basic questions that have larger implications when they are then used to interpret how it helps human health. So basic science presentations might be ones where someone asks a question about what does this gene do? Or what happens if this particular gene is knocked out? So that all that work might be done in a model system, but if you take a step back, the findings have implications for human health. And that's why these kinds of talks are often at scientific research conferences. On the other end of the spectrum, we have clinical research. These are presentations where we talk about what's going on, what we're finding from clinical trials. So these are all patient data. This is findings that are moving their way through the clinic. And these will be findings either from phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. Phase 1, we're really trying to demonstrate safety. Phase 2, we're starting to try to demonstrate efficacy, but in a very small number of people. Once we get to phase 3 and 4 clinical trials, this is where we have huge numbers of people, usually from many different locations around the country or even around the world. And we're putting all of that data together to show how effective a new treatment might be as compared to the standard of care. Now, in between those, we have translational research. This is research that spans that line in between the two of basic and clinical. Translational research is often what you see at scientific conferences like AACR, the American Association for Cancer Research, because what we're trying to do is take the basic findings in the model systems and translate that into something or determine its relevance for the clinic. And so a lot of the data you'll see in translational presentations has to do with taking basic questions and asking if they're relevant for people and using model systems to dive a little deeper into what are the implications for human health. So again, you'll see conversations or discussions or presentations that cover all of these at scientific research conferences. So finally, who attends these? Who will be there? Probably you could have guessed scientists. These are scientists from lots of different specialty areas in science. These might be people who work in a lab all the time. These might be people who work in the clinic all the time. These might be people who go back and forth between the two. Some researchers have both an MD to be able to see patients, and they have a PhD, which means they have training in basic science in the laboratory. And so some people will actually do both. You're going to see clinicians and other healthcare professionals. Many times nurses and physician's assistants will also come to conferences like this to learn about the new cutting edge findings so they can be most up to date on what information they're giving to their patients. You'll also see a huge number of students. Sometimes as many as 50% of the participants at these conferences are trainees, which is wonderful to see because this is really where they can showcase their work. Many times the cutting edge work being done in the lab the work is being done by a student or a trainee. And they have an advisor, a scientist who's been in the field for a while, who is mentoring and supervising them and helping them to do a good job. But most of the presentations you'll see, especially at the posters, are given by trainees. And they absolutely love to talk to anyone and everyone about what they're doing. So many times at these conferences, if you have an opportunity to go to poster sessions and talk to the people presenting their work, you're going to get a really great dialogue about what someone is learning. The other groups of people who often attend are people from industry or the biotech sector or biopharma. So many times people from industry will attend scientific conferences, both to also be up to date on the newest science, but also to forge collaborations with scientists. So Sasha mentioned before, one of the ways that scientific research is funded is primarily through government funds and additionally through philanthropy or fundraising and other support from various organizations. Those are definitely true. In our current era, another big way that many labs get funded is through what's called a sponsored research agreement. These are collaborations between the biotech industry and researchers in academic settings to try to move science along much faster. So this is a third pillar for where funding for scientific research can come from. And so industry participants are often at these conferences in order to find scientists working in their field or their specific interest area to try to build those types of collaborations. In addition, journal editors and members of the press are often at these conferences because one of the big ways that we make science accessible to other scientists is by writing about it. So editors of journals who publish scientific papers are looking for the new hot topics, the new cutting edge stories, and members of the popular press are there to be able to write articles and tell the general audience, the lay public, what kinds of things are being discovered in scientific research. Now, finally, certainly not least, but finally in my list are research advocates. So these are survivors, people who are advocates from all different perspectives who attend conferences in order to both learn and to share their stories. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to our very esteemed guest, Annie Ellis, who's here to talk to us about her experience as a research advocate. And Annie has extensive experience in this area, including experience at the AACR Scientist Survivor Program, which is something we're going to talk a little bit more about at the end of the conversation today. So with that, thank you, Annie, for being here.
Oh, thank you, Kristin, for having me. And thank you, Sasha, for inviting me to spend time with you this morning. I know it's very early for some of you, so thank you for waking up. I hope you've got your coffee. I'm really excited about the Foundation's commitment to research and empowering advocates to be involved in research activities with researchers. Next slide. I'm going to share about how I became interested in research advocacy, a little bit about some of my research advocacy involvement, what it's like to attend a scientific conference as an advocate, and a little bit about participating in the AACR SSP, the Scientist Survivor Program. I do see a few familiar faces, and so hi there. But a little bit about me, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2004, and the first 4 years were pretty rough. I had 2 recurrences, first on and then in my liver. I had a total of 3 debulking surgeries. The last one was a partial liver resection. I had 5 lines of treatment, and I participated in a phase 1 remission vaccine clinical trial. It was a protein vaccine, nothing sexy like the CAR Ts that Kristin is involved with. In 2010, I was diagnosed with a stage 1 breast cancer. I've had a lot of genetic testing. No hereditary mutations have been found. And currently I'm NED from both cancers and followed up in survivorship clinic on both the breast and ovarian sides. So next slide, please. So I got hooked on research in 2008. I was newly in 3rd remission, and I was invited with a group of survivors from SHARE to present the patient perspective at the annual meeting of the Society of Gynecologic Oncology. The first 2 days, I was just so excited to be there, and I was looking for my cure. Not a cure, not the cure. I wanted my cure. And as I started attending these sessions, I realized that in 2008, they didn't know. They didn't know how to cure someone like me who has had, 2 recurrences with liver mets. And so I was very discouraged. I went back on the second day and I started listening a little bit more deeply. And the dialogue that the researchers and doctors were having was just so profound that even though they didn't know, they were working really hard and they were passionate about it. And everybody just wanted the same thing for people who were diagnosed with gynecologic cancers to do better. And on the 3rd day, next, I attended an early morning session on the state of the science, and there was a presentation on proteomics. And this was not the slide that was up there. It was a more rudimentary slide because it was, practically 10 years before this, but it was showing how the cells use proteins to talk to each other. I didn't understand it. A lot of the people around me didn't understand it, but to me, it was just beautiful because this was the future. And I felt that my best chance of staying alive was to stay connected with the research and what was coming up through the pipeline. Next. So I made a commitment to, follow what was going on, and this interest led to further opportunities. Next slide. And next. Okay. So I've been so fortunate to have had so many opportunities to bring patient perspectives into scientific discussions in so many ways along the research continuum. Everything from grant review, both peer and programmatic, to translational team science, clinical trial concept review, regulatory, approval process, that's with the FDA. I've been involved in guideline development to see how each of these building blocks of evidence, turn into a guideline that tells people how to treat people in the clinic, as well as cancer care delivery, some of the implementation science that needs to happen to actually get these novel treatments to the people who need them the most. It takes a tremendous amount of dedicated professionals and hard work to do all this, to bring these new discoveries to people. And it's really exciting as a research advocate to have a front row seat as technology has evolved, and it allows researchers to see things they have never seen before. Next. These are just some of the ways that some of my dissemination partners and some of the places that I've served. Like most people with ovarian cancer, I cut my teeth, at the DoD ovarian cancer research program, and that's led to so many opportunities, including at the NCI. I'm currently chair of NCI's Council of Research Advocates, which is the only federal advisory committee made completely of advocates. Next. So a little bit about what it's like to attend a scientific conference from the advocate perspective. Each of these conferences may have a little bit of a different focus, but the structure is very similar, as Kristin pointed out earlier. Oral presentations, poster presentations, exhibits, and lots of dialogue, which to me is the most important part. It's the meat and potatoes, is to hear people talk about it. One thing about attending the conference as a survivor is that we speak in the language of hope. We share by telling our stories. Scientists speak the language of data, which is statistics. Don't be afraid of the math, because at first I thought, oh, I'm horrible at math. I'm just never going to get this. But all it takes is, if you know your way around an abstract and have Google to help you out to understand, and aren't afraid to ask questions, you'll get by. You'll find a way to get by. The one thing you also have to do is to, I had to brace myself, because almost every single ovarian cancer presentation begins with the word, ovarian cancer is the most deadly of gynecologic cancers. And to hear that, and even in review, grant review, everything, that's what it starts with. And so I had to learn to kind of gloss over that, shut my ears, shut my eyes for a little bit, and kind of get hardened to that reality. So my first conference was the SGO. That same year, I was able to attend a conference on survivorship, which was a totally different animal. And it was also a small conference. Then, of course, AACR through the Scientist Survivor Program, but AACR has little baby conferences that are organ specific, or on disparities, or just immunotherapy. They could be focused on a specific thing. Some of these things are free or at low cost to patient advocates, and are also a great way to participate. ASCO is like the big daddy of them all. There's going to be, 34 to 42,000 people. They do have patient advocate scholarships. I recently spoke at the International Gynecologic Cancer Society. They have a patient advocate forum that is free. And then I went to the AACI, which is the American Association of Cancer Institutes, and they have a Cancer Research Innovations Forum. And what's really interesting about them is that there's also conferences about how to do clinical trials and how to do things better. Next. my dissemination partner is usually the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance, and I have some research reports there. So why I attend and what do I get out of it? Well, at first I attended for very selfish reasons. I was just looking for my cure. But now that I'm involved in research advocacy and peer support, I do it to keep up with the advances. I do it to hear the dialogue, specifically the hot topics and some complicated issues. And hearing different perspectives and being open to different ways of thinking about things helps deepen my own understanding of complicated topics. It's an opportunity to connect with researchers, other advocates, and learn about more resources, and also opportunities to serve as a research advocate. One of my main partners, co-authors, is somebody who I connected with at one of these conferences. Next slide, please. So what's it like to navigate a scientific conference? It takes a little bit of preparation, whether you're in a program or not. Next. The first thing is to think about logistics. Where's the meeting going to be? Is it local? Do you have to travel? Is there a discount if you sign up early? Is there an advocate program or scholarships? Is there a virtual option? Last year, just about everybody was allowing advocates to attend their virtual conferences for free. And some of these conferences also have free or low-cost exhibit space for advocacy organizations to connect with the people who are attending. Next. Yes, you have to plan ahead and schedule. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. As Kristin said earlier, things are happening at the same time. And sometimes you have to make some really hard choices about what you want to be. Until cloning happens, I can only go to one thing at a time. But if I look at the agenda, which is sometimes in an app now, I can see that the person I want to hear is at the end of a session, and I could maybe like go to the beginning of a session and then go to another session. Are you focused only on your organ? Are you focused on something new? Are you interested in resistance or rare cancers or biomarkers? You can choose what your focus is going to be. I used to just try to go to all the ovarian things. And then I learned I go to things that are kind of close together because things can be really far apart. But you choose your own adventure. I look at the attendee list. If my doctor is going to present, I'm going to track them down and stalk a little bit. If there's another advocate that I want to meet up, especially somebody who I consider a mentor, I will send an email. Hey, I saw you're going to be at the conference. You got time for a cup of coffee? I have learned so much from the knee of some really experienced mentors that have made me the advocate that I am today. So just take a quick look. What's going on and who's going? So during the meeting, you've got to be flexible. You may not get to do everything that you set out to do. I'd like to also pay attention. Some of the sessions, the opening plenary, invited speakers, some really high level, exciting things may be going on during these times. Late breaking abstracts is usually the very, very latest. And, that's one not to miss. We talked a little bit about, discussions. It used to be when I first started going that the presentations were done in debate format. And that was a way to get the good, bad, and the ugly about the science, kind of out and talked about in the space of 10 minutes. Now they have a lot of conferences are using the distillation format where they'll group like maybe 3 or 4 presentations that are very similar along or have a similar theme. And then a distillant will come and do a high level review and then also talk about how each fits together with what we already know. The distillations are amazing and worth staying for. You have an opportunity to connect with researchers. You can ask, as an advocate, you can ask a question during the main session. Go to the microphone. Introduce yourself as a survivor and, ask a question. I do want to avoid asking a second opinion type question. And if you can phrase your question in a general way, instead of saying, hey, what does somebody who's already been on treatment A, B, and C do after whatever? You could say like, hey, many people are resistant to a lot of treatments. What options do they have? Would be a way to do that. visit the posters, get that one-on-one time. It's a really great way to connect with people that you might work with at meals, on breaks, and also follow on social media. I don't know what's going to happen to Twitter, but a lot of people are following the meeting on Twitter, and you can actually ask questions. People are debating the science on Twitter. If you can't go to the meeting, sometimes just following it on Twitter, you can kind of get, you know, a flavor for what's going on. And also my go-to, if I can't think of anything to say, but I see somebody who I want to interact with, is just to say, thank you for your work. I'm a fan. And, you know, that's just a way to open the door. Next. Also, if you're attending these meetings, they can go over several days. Make sure that you take care of yourself. You want to eat, drink, rest. Food is usually supplied. You want to be comfortable. I think the first conference I went to, I was in teal from head to toe. I was in full-on survivor mode. If you want to be seen as a colleague and a peer, you want to probably dress a little bit more professionally. But I personally, I leave the sexy shoes at home. I do not wear heels. I wear flats. I will go into flip-flops if I can later on, you know, but just be comfortable, take a wrap. It's cold. And I have in my survival bag is a phone charger, as well as snacks and water. And next, and after the meeting, follow up, share what you've learned. Follow up, you know, if somebody paid for you to be there, you need to thank them. You need to do whatever it is you're required to do. And if advocate membership is offered, please take advantage of that. Usually it's not very much, but it can get you into opportunities to serve as a research advocate. Next slide. And I'm going to try to wrap this up because I've gone on way too long. I was able to participate in the AACR Scientist Survivor Program. I think the first time was, I'm going to say 2014. And it's really an opportunity to attend a very large meeting in a program where you're supported. People who attend this have a scientific mentor as well as an advocate mentor who's attended at least twice. There are special sessions just for the advocates. You're invited to special events and receptions. We got a lab visit 1 year. You're networking not only with the scientists, but other advocates, and you are eligible for membership in AACR. There are responsibilities to attending the SSP, which is you are expected to attend and prepare. There may be some work beforehand. You will present a poster, and you will collaborate with a working group. And it is required that you disseminate. I will say that it was the most exhausting and exhilarating thing I've ever done, but it opened my mind and challenged me to think and grow beyond what I thought was ever possible. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. And Sasha, I hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annie. When I first met Annie and read her bio, the first thing I said to her was, I want to be you when I grow up. And Annie responded with, no, you want to be the best you that you can be. And I have totally taken that to heart. And that is really what we want to offer to at least one advocate through our program. So as I mentioned, we are really committed to promoting advocates in research. And to that end, we have a really great opportunity to have more of our voices heard in research. The Powell-Drescher Foundation is going to be sponsoring an advocate to attend the AACR excuse me, annual conference in Orlando in April. And while there, the advocate will get to participate in the Scientist Survivor Program. For our purposes, for our program, an advocate is defined as a patient, survivor, family member, caregiver, previvor, in other words, someone with a genetic predisposition to ovarian cancer, such as a BRCA mutation, or other person who has been touched by ovarian cancer. So it's a very broad definition. The dates of the conference are April 14 through 19 of 2023, although you may be required to travel a day or two on either side of that. It's also possible that you will be asked to share accommodations with another ovarian cancer advocate. And the purpose of that is we may actually be able to send 2 advocates, but one of the ways that we may be able to fund that is if we can cut some of the costs through shared accommodations. Prior to the conference, there will be, as Annie mentioned, some required training and preparation that the AACR provides. And in addition, depending on the level of experience of the advocate or advocates that we select, we may also provide some additional training or preparation for you. We really want to provide you with all the resources necessary to have the best experience at the conference. But most certainly, one of the preparation will be including meeting a scientist mentor both before the conference and then also at the conference as well. So in exchange for the sponsorship, what we ask is that you share your experience as a representative of the Powell-Drescher Foundation through the end of calendar year 2023. And that might look like providing a summary of your conference experience. It might be reporting on your ongoing advocacy activities. It might be speaking at some of our foundation presentations, might be helping us review applications for future advocates to attend research conferences. All of the applications that we receive will be reviewed by a group of scientists and survivors, and we will be reviewing for three main areas. First is involvement in the ovarian cancer community. Second is your commitment to the idea of research advocacy. And finally, to your ability to help us really power forward the mission of our foundation. We are going to go through and review the applications, and then we will select a list of nominees to send to the AACR, people that we think would be great candidates. And the AACR is ultimately going to make the final decision in who can attend. The application is currently available on our website, as well as all of the information that I've gone through and some additional information. It is due by December 31st of 2022 to be considered for next year's program. And we will be notifying the applicants by March 1st of 2023 regarding who has been selected. Whether or not you think this is the right program for you, I really encourage you to share this information with your colleagues and friends. We really have two amazing resources here today as well, and we're going to open the session now to questions. I hope you seize on this opportunity to get Annie and Kristin's thoughts, because as I said, they are amazing wealths of information. And I did notice that we had one question pop up, and it is, can you repeat who qualifies for your program to go to the AACR? Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, it's a really broad definition for us. It can be a patient, a survivor, a family member, caregiver, previvor, or really any other person touched by ovarian cancer. Please feel free to jump in with any other questions.
Can you say something more about the poster?
Kristin or Annie, you want to take that?
Yeah, so the poster is pretty much up to you. On AACR's website, they have a list of the people who presented this year, and it's the years that I've gone. It's everything from there are some people who come from their institutions who clearly have help with their posters, to people who are putting up cardboard and markers about what they want. So they don't have any requirements, but it's an opportunity for the advocates who attend the SSP to highlight either the things that they're personally involved in, an issue that they're passionate about, or what their group is doing.
So I'm assuming in this case, the poster would be about the Powell-Drescher fund, right?
So I think it's safe to say that the Powell-Drescher Foundation would help the advocates that we send to put a poster together. And certainly it would be great to have the foundation featured on the poster in some capacity, but this is an opportunity to really work with the advocate to figure out, what are you passionate about? What are the problems you see? What are the things you would really like to bring awareness to? And so if you have an idea, I think that's what we would work with you to feature. If you want to go just as a representative of the foundation and to have the poster be, here is the foundation, I think that's also an option. So I think the answer to that is it's flexible. There's a lot of opportunity to craft a poster that the advocate is comfortable presenting.
And
Thank you.
the poster space is big. So you can make your fonts as big or as little as you want. Your pictures, you can say a lot. I've seen novels up there from some people. I don't recommend it, but there's no limitation. And I think, you can even divide your poster in like 3 things. You want to tell your story. And because really the purpose of this is, they've had us in some pretty high traffic areas in the past. I know other classes who've been in the corner, but lately, leadership has got the SSP posters in high traffic areas. And so at a minimum, the people who will be coming to visit you are the other scientific mentors of the program. But I've had people come from industry. I've had other people come. What's going to be the biggest draw is your title. And, Kristin will be able to help you work on a title that will draw people in based on what you choose to present.
Annie, I have a quick question for you, and also for Sasha, and also for Kristin. Could you articulate roughly how many advocates attend the AACR every year for specifically this special program, the Scientist Survivor Program, which happens, I think, every other year?
Now, the Scientist Survivor Program happens every year, and it's been going on for I think 24 years now. I was in the class in 2018. It was their 20th anniversary. So we had a lot of special things going on then. There are generally between 25 to 30 participants. Each working group will have 5 or 6 advocates. Most of those advocates are brand new to the program, and one of the advocates will be someone who returns. And so you'll actually have 2 advocates who are not new to the program. One would be like the senior working group person, and then one would be the advocate mentor. So it's highly competitive.
And I'll add to that, like Annie said, 2018 was the 20th anniversary of this program. 2023 is going to be the 25th anniversary of the program. So they are planning some extra stuff this coming year, special events, special opportunities for those who are in the Scientist Survivor Program.
I think Heidi has her hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. Good morning. Going back to the poster, when you were talking about the poster, realistically for a novice, what would the time commitment be to put something like that together? How much time would be involved with that?
It depends on what you want to say and what you already know, right? The first year I attended, I looked at the old posters, and I attended as an independent advocate because somebody who'd been telling me, "Oh, Annie, you need to apply for this." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't have time." I was still working full time at the time. So I understand your time constraints. And I was looking at the independent advocate posters. I applied on the last day. And so I didn't have time to get letters of support from letters of nomination from my organizations. So I went independent, and I looked at the independent advocate posters. I'm like, they were all telling their stories with like 5 pictures of themselves. I'm like, there's just no way I'm going to put 5 pictures of me on here. So I actually did a research project, and I did a survey, and I kind of reported out on that. But what you can do is, I know that you already, you already participate in some research, activities, and you can say what it's, if I were, knowing who you are, you can describe what it's like, research advocacy from, how growing up as a research advocate. You can talk a little bit about ovarian cancer. You can talk about what you see are the needs. And so it's really, you can spend as little as, it's going to take you at least an hour you know,
Oh,
and
okay.
then, you know, how much more effort to, you know, find your pictures and make pretty. There's I like to use poster presentations for my posters. They've got like the best price. They have foldable posters. The one thing the SSP does not reimburse you for is for your poster. And
Mhm.
so, but I didn't, or you can go have them printed at Staples or an office supply store. So, and roll them up. Do consider, it does count as a carry-on. So just,
I have a
but,
thought on this one.
okay.
Actually print on fabric now, and it's about the same price as printing on the giant pieces of rollable paper. And then you don't need a poster tube, and all you have to do is iron it the night before in your hotel room, and then it's beautiful and you can put it in your check bag.
Yeah, and it does come out just as nicely as a poster, but like I have to tell you, it is so exciting to go and to the airport and see all the people with their poster tubes. I miss that, but yeah, fabric is the way to go.
And we will
All right,
certainly,
thank you.
as a foundation, will certainly help you with your poster. And if we are the ones sponsoring you, we'll cover the cost of that as well. Let's see if we have any other questions.
Annie, I have another question for clarification. You indicated that you went as an independent. I'm under the impression that as an advocate, you either go as an independent or representing a group, like in this case, the Powell-Drescher org. Can you talk about how the differences are of the posters with regards to those different perspectives?
Yeah, there's just such a wide range. You can tell who is like, some of the cancer institutions have advocate groups. You can tell when somebody else made somebody's poster. You know, it's really clear. You can tell a pure advocate poster and who's not. But they're starting to look more and more professional because people are using these things. I wouldn't get too. The poster session is only, you know, 2 to 4 hours of your whole 5-day adventure. So don't get too caught up on the poster. I know people, when I was a mentor, people were just really sweating that out because, oh, you know, it's just, but really what you're there for is to learn and connect. And, you know, this is an opportunity to have a platform, right? But it is not the, it's just a small part of the whole program. But if anybody wants to, you know, kick ideas around offline, once they get accepted, I'm happy to do so. But I really don't let the poster stop you. Be excited.
Sasha, have you gone as a patient advocate yourself?
I have not.
Oh,
I have attended the conference, but not the Scientist Survivor program.
Yeah, I think one thing that we didn't actually emphasize today that that Annie pointed out and that I want to make sure gets highlighted is in the name Scientist Survivor Program, there's a bi-directional arrow between the word scientist and survivor. And they did that very intentionally. This program is not just about advocates learning about science. It actually goes both directions. So what you bring as an advocate is something very valuable. And the program recognizes this, the scientists recognize this, the mentors recognize this. So they're going to try to help you feature the thing you are an expert in, because that has a lot of value at a platform or a meeting like this.
Dr. Anderson, I have a quick question for you. Will you be attending this year's conference? And also, will Dr. Drescher be attending this year's conference?
Yes, I am planning to be there. So I will be an additional support for anyone in the program from the Powell-Drescher organization.
Yeah, I will as well. This is Chuck Drescher. Thank you all for attending this morning.
All right, any other questions?
I have one last question for you, Sasha. Forgive me with all my questions.
No, I love them.
When you get the opportunity, could you help all of us better understand what expectations the organization would like to have as an outcome from this in terms of our deliverable. I know Annie's talked about some organizations requesting social media or an article or just writing up a debrief. That would be very helpful to get a good understanding about what we as potential advocates would like to know what we're accountable for at the end of the conference.
Right. It's so we actually listed several examples in the beginning of the application, but it is also something that we want to talk to the advocate about, because we listed examples doesn't mean they're the best ideas out there. So we also hope that the advocate will provide some ideas for us about how they think we can best disseminate the information. So it's going to be a mutual agreement more than a decree, if that helps. But there are some specific examples listed in the application about disseminating the information.
And if I could add something just purely from an advocate point of view, when I first attended a scientific conference, you know, what I was looking for then is different from what I'm looking for now. And I'm hoping that if you're excited and you're interested in the science, that you'll be open to opportunities that come your way, or, you know, maybe thinking different about it. You know, think about what it is you would like to learn or achieve as a person, as an advocate, as somebody who helps other people.
Great. Well, on that note, I'm going to thank you all for joining us this morning. This has been incredible. If you have any further questions or think of something later, you can either submit them through our website, which is powell-drescher.org, or you can email them directly. It's powell-drescher@gmail.com. You will receive a survey from us, and we hope that you'll really complete it and give us your feedback. We want to make our program the best it can be, and we can do that really with your support and your responses. So please take a look for that survey and fill it out. You can check out our website anytime. For all our current activities, we usually have something fun going on, and you can follow our fun on social media. We are at Powell-Drescher on Instagram and Facebook, and at Ovarian on Twitter. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning, and a special thank you to Kristin Anderson and Annie Ellis for sharing your incredible expertise on this topic. Thank you all.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.